Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Well, yeah. I don't know what I don't know. I can't help you with that. I'm not going to do that. It's not my job. I don't care. I don't care how you feel. I don't care what you think. It's just not my thing. I can't listen to you anymore. Okay? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Good luck with that. Hey, I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta go. All right. Love you too, Mom. Some people are just really hard to work with. This week, we're going to talk about a very important topic, and that is, yes, servant leadership. Now, personally, I believe that this is something we're real good about talking about. We're real good at talking about, but we're not real good at practicing. Now, we know that Jesus told us to be servant leaders. He said, if you want to be great in the kingdom, you must be a servant of all. And he even modeled this to his disciples by washing their feet, a job that only a lowly servant would do. But in practice, how do we do this today in a ministry context? How do we really practice being servant leaders? There's not a whole lot of foot washing to be done, right? Well, hopefully this lecture here will give you some practical ideas and outline the steps, the practical steps, the things you can actually do, the attitudes that you need to take on in order to be an effective servant leader. So, hang on as we take a whirlwind tour through the world of servant leadership. Robert Greenleaf was the first person to actually coin the term servant leadership. He did this in a book of his called The Servant as Leader back in 1970, and another famous book in 1977. Now, Greenleaf was inspired by the work of Hermann Hesse, and Hermann Hesse wrote a short story called Journey to the East. And this was an interesting book. It told the fictional, mythical story of a band of travelers who were on a spiritual journey. And on their journey, they had a servant, and the servant's name was Leo. And Leo, besides, doing the menial tasks of washing and cleaning, was also a very powerful spiritual presence. He was an encourager. He kind of kept the group together spiritually in a sense. And one night Leo wandered off, and he was nowhere to be found. He basically abandoned the caravan. And in time, the travelers began to bicker and argue, and they lost their vision and they lost their motivation to continue on with the journey. But they finally made it. And when they arrived to see the wise man, they saw that, guess who the wise man was? Yes, it was Leo. He was actually the one who was there as a servant. And so the moral of the story that Greenleaf really took away to develop his theory was that leaders serve a powerful role when they learn how to serve others. And the true authority and true power comes when we really understand people, when we are there to provide them that nurture, that support, that encouragement they need to make it along the journey. Now, of course, we also know that Scripture talks about servant leadership and that Jesus modeled it and spoke about it a lot, right? He said, whoever wants to become great among you must be servant. Whoever wants to be first must be your slave. And interestingly, this is one of the few passages that's actually in all four of the Gospels. And so it must have been important to the Gospel writers. They all included it. And so we also see that Jesus modeled this in the upper room, right? We see in John, I believe, chapter 13, where he actually got down and washed his disciples' feet. Now, you have to understand, back in the day, this was a job that was reserved for the servants, the lowest of the low. And if there was no servant, then the person of least standing would be the one who would wash the feet. And so here you got to picture this. Here's the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, through whom all things were created, actually stoops down and washes these nasty, dirty feet from these disciples. And so not only did he tell people to be servants, but he actually modeled it. And this is important because when we are trying to create an organization, a culture, if you will, the values, the assumptions and mindsets, we can't just tell people to do something. We actually have to do it. And again, I think this is one of the challenges of servant leadership, is it's very hard to practice because we are so caught up in the authoritarian model of leadership, not really the servant model of leadership. So the servant, it's not just about acts of service, but it's really about seeing yourself as a servant first. And so servant leaders see themselves as a servant first, not just doing acts. And the stewardship of the people they lead is a critical characteristic of a servant leader. We understand that stewardship has to do with ownership, and it's the idea that we don't own things and that we don't really control people. They're not our people per se, but we have been entrusted with their oversight. This is an important mindset to adopt as a servant leader, is that we are stewards of the people that we lead, not masters, not tyrants, etc. And so we see that Jesus was deeply secure in his own identity. And why is this important? Because I think the challenge to servant leadership is that, if you're insecure, if you feel like you need people to build you up in order to meet your ego needs, your esteem needs, it's really hard to serve them. It's really hard to build them up, right? Because we sort of see authority or whatever as sort of a zero-sum game. And if we give something away to somebody else, well, that means that we have less of it. But really, servant leadership is the opposite. It says the more we empower people, the more we build them up, the more we're concerned about their well-being rather than our well-being, the greater that we will rise in our own leadership, because we are really doing what leaders do, which is building other people and empowering other people and getting other people on board with our vision and our passion. Okay, so let's talk about some specifics here. And Spears laid out 10 characteristics of servant leaders that we're going to take some time going through now. And here they are in order: listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, conceptualization, foresight, stewardship, commitment to the growth of people, and last but not least, building community. So let's go through these one at a time. The first of these is listening. The servant leader will reinforce these skills by a deep commitment to listen intently to others. He or she seeks to listen receptively to what is being said and not said, right? So we have to take the time to listen to people. And a lot of us, when we talk to people, even when we get in conflictual situations, we're just sort of thinking about what we're going to say next, right? We're not really listening. We're kind of prejudging people. We already have our biases. We already have our point of view firmly in our mind, and we're not going to budge on that. But to be a servant leader, it means you need to kind of bracket that stuff. You need to lay it down. It doesn't mean don't have an opinion or a point of view, but when you're interacting with people, you just need to stop, to silence those voices. Don't be thinking about your rebuttal, but really, really, truly listen to them. And we know that James tells us to be quick to listen and slow to speak. I like this quote here by a guy named David Augsburger. He said that being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. And so if you want to show people you love them, listen to them. They will feel love from you if you simply take the time to listen to them. Most people don't take time to listen to others. Most people don't feel heard today. And I think this is a vital skill for servant leaders, is to learn how to listen to people. The next one is empathy. People need to be accepted and recognized for their special and unique spirit. And let's face it, people are going through things, right? And we need to be able to get down there with them to show them that not only do we love them and are concerned about them, but we understand what they're going through, and it's important. And Brene Brown made a good distinction between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is simply feeling sorry for others, right? Oh man, I feel really bad. That's, it's horrible. You're going through that, man. That's gotta suck. I can't believe that. Well, what's that like? Versus empathy, which is really feeling the pain with others, taking the time to sit with them and to commiserate and to try to empathize, to really feel what they're feeling. And that's not easy, right? It's easy to say, hey, sorry, but to really take time and to spend time and to listen again, right? and to empathize with what they're going through. I think of the story of Job and Job's friends. I remember when Job was really going through it and he had lost everything. He lost his possessions and his family, and his friends showed up, and what did they do? It just says for a week they just sat there. They just sat with Job. They didn't really say anything. Now later on they say something, but they just took time to spend with him, man. If you want to show somebody you love them and you really want to serve them, take time, show up. Presence is really a big part of servant leadership, is being there and present with people when they need you. The next one is healing. Servant leaders recognize that they have an opportunity to help make whole those with whom they come into contact. And again, we live in such a broken world, a pain-filled world. People come to us, especially in churches, with all kinds of dysfunctions and past pains, and they need healing. And we know that ultimately Jesus is the only one that can heal them. But we also know that the Lord uses us as agents of healing to help people work through their issues, to be a resource for them, to maybe it's even physical healing, right? Sometimes people need healing, and we can pray for their healing, and we can tarry until the Lord heals, or maybe we even need to make a recommendation for a counselor, for a doctor, whatever it is. But it's just a mindset, right? We're not doctors necessarily, but we have to recognize that part of what we do is help people get healthy, right? Look at the word healing. It has health in it. And so we get people get healthy, whether that's physical, spiritual, emotional. That's part of what servant leaders do, is to help people find personal health. The next one is awareness. Awareness helps one in understanding issues involving ethics, power, and values. Now, why is this important? Because so many different quandaries, ethical issues, and power and values issues come up in leadership, and servant leaders need to make sure that they are aware of what the issues are, right? So, for example, if there's a bias or some sort of injustice, right, taking place within your organization, with your staff, with your team, you've got to spot that out. You can't be the one that glosses over and says, well, it's just kind of the way it is. Servant leaders are aware of the types of issues, the injustices, who has power, who doesn't have power, what the underlying assumptions and values are in any particular situation. So this takes time, right? Again, we like to be quick to react. We like to be quick to be the hero, sort of the heroic model of leadership. Sometimes being aware means taking time and being reflective and helping people to see things from an ethics and value perspective. The next is persuasion. The servant leader seeks to convince others rather than coerce compliance, right? So the authoritarian model says, hey, I'm in charge, you need to do this. The servant leader model says, look, let me explain to you why this is important. Not because I'm the leader, because I said so, right? How many of you remember your dad, your mom or dad, when you were a kid and you had a question and said, well, why do I need to do that? Why do I need to clean my room? You'd say what? Well, because I'm the dad, I'm the mom, because I said so. That's kind of a coercive appliance. It's sort of relying upon your positional power to coerce people into doing what you want. But that's not what servant leadership is about. It's about persuading people and giving them good reasons, helping them to understand the argument, to understand the issue from your point of view, right? And giving them their own reasons to be motivated. What's in it for, not to be selfish, but what is in it for them? Why is it in their best interest to participate, to do X or Y, right? So, why do I have to clean my room? Well, because if you clean your room, you'll be happier playing in there. And mom will be happy, and we know that if mom's not happy, then nobody's happy, right? Okay, so give Junior some, that's kind of a funny example, but, give him some reasons he can understand. Give people reasons they can understand why they should be committed to certain goals as you are. And then stewardship. I mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but really the definition of stewardship is holding something in trust for another. And I think this is important, and this is where a lot of leaders sort of in the traditional top-down authoritarian model get hung up. They believe that this is their stuff. This is their church, their ministry, their goods, or whatever. But the reality is, if you're involved in ministry, then everything you have, including the people that come to you, the people that serve with you, either on staff, as volunteers, your peers, these are the Lord's people. These are the Lord's servants, right? And you are a steward. So that you are there to shepherd them in a sense as stewards. They're not yours. You're holding on to something in trust for another, right? So the Lord's going to have an accounting for each of us, right? How we treat other people. And I believe having that mindset really can transform our thinking. These aren't my people. This isn't my staff. This isn't my thing, my employees, but I'm really a steward over them. And so this is an important servant leadership mindset to really understand that you're doing this on behalf of somebody else. And then there's commitment to the growth of people. And just understanding that people have intrinsic value. Everybody. And this is challenging, right? Because some people are like, I don't know what value this guy has. This guy's useless, right? Well, everybody has some intrinsic value. And if they're there serving with you, you have to understand that and be committed to their growth. And then building community, and this is important here as well. And once upon a time, there was, a sense of smaller communities, and people lived in villages, and everybody knew everybody. Now, maybe you came from a small town and kind of understood this dynamic. I didn't. I came from a large suburban area, and it was just you really didn't get to know your neighbors a whole lot. But we know that life has changed, right? And people live now sort of in large and personal communities, or people living together. There's really not a sense that we know each other, that it's hard to find friends and people who are similar to us. I think that's kind of part of the rise of the internet and kind of a little cliquey groups, little sub-cults and interest groups that kind of rise all over the place. But people really have a need for this, don't they? And so servant leaders need to understand that community can be created, and they need to help people find community and build community. Some of you guys probably remember that old show Friends, right? The theme song, I'll be there for you, right? I'll be there. People want to know that there's people there for them. Some of you can go way back and remember Cheers, right? You want to go where everybody knows your name, right? Everybody's somebody, even if you're sitting on a bar stool there like old Norm. So I've got some questions here for reflection. Think about your own life and in terms of servant leadership. And of course, there's some challenges in servant leadership. And so think about what challenges you can foresee in practicing servant leadership in the real world. What challenges do you face in growing as a servant leader? Well, that wraps up that discussion on servant leadership. I hope that was helpful. Again, we talk a lot about servant leadership, but it's not always easy to do. And I'm not saying I haven't mastered. In fact, I need to get back on the phone and patch up that little conversation I was having there. I need to grow as a servant leader. I think we all do. And hopefully these 10 ideas here, these practical steps of how we can become a better servant leader, will be helpful to you. Blessings to you all.